You all for joining us today. We have a great webinar coming up. It is fertilizer reduction and turf management. As you can see, the picture behind is Bolingbrook Land Design in Tennessee, the current user of our Holganix Bio 800 Plus, and which contains a multitude of soil microbes, which is our focus today. I am your host, Rob McCoy. I am the sales manager here at Holganix. I get to work with a lot of great customers and kind of steal their insight along with what we get through some of our testing and university studies. So I'm going to be sharing that with you today and what we've found really works and how it works. The agenda today, to be more specific, is the role of soil microbes to improve fertilizer efficiency. We're going to go through kind of how that works. We're going to go through a little bit of university data, some of the case studies, and then open it up for question and answer. So one of the first things to understand is the difference between nutrient-rich soil versus infertile dirt. You know, we kind of have a saying here, do you have soil or do you have dirt? You know, one of the things that we look at is soil has an abundance of life in it. It can process nutrients. It can basically solve its own problems and run through the soil, cycle of life, and what we call the soil food web. So the question isn't really, do you have soil or do you have dirt? Is, do you have the soil that you need for the plant type that you're trying to grow? So one of the things that we look at is what type of soil microbes do you have in your soil, and do you have them in the quantities that you need to have it be functional for that type of plant? So we're specifically looking at things like bacteria, fungi, algae, protozoa, nematodes. You know, there's some of the main players that are incorporated into the soil food web, but the balance of those, specifically if you look at something as simple as like grass versus a shrub. Grass will require soil that is a little bit more bacteria focused, whereas a shrub will require soil that's a little bit more fungi focused. So when we're appealing to those plant types, we want those plant types to feel as though they are in their native environment, that they had everything that they need. That's why they chose to grow there. If you look at like farming practices, a lot of the same crops will be grown in the same fields over and over and over again. That's good because of the soil microbes being tailored to the need of that, but they also do run through their life cycle and sometimes don't get replenished because they weren't native to the weather environment that's there. Sometimes they are, and sometimes they aren't. If you think about residential properties, almost 100% of the time, the plants that are on the homeowner's property are not native to that spot. Not that they're not native to that environment, but they're not native to that spot. So they may not have the balance of soil microbes that they're looking for. So if we look at the types of soil microbes, bacteria is a huge player. They're involved in basic enzyme transformations that make it possible to grow higher plants, including our crops. Bacteria is probably the most important thing when it comes to the soil food web, just because of how they process nitrogen. You also have fungi. Fungi degrade organic matter. You know, when we're, you know, we look at crop residue, and we steal that information and use it in like golf course management. The way that ties together is in crop residue, you're going to have, say that you're harvesting corn, you're going to have the stalk and the root system that is left behind after that harvest happens. How does that break down? How is that utilized in the soil? If you have an abundance of fungi, you're probably going to have a great breakdown, and that is going to release nutrients and organic matter back into the soil so that it can be utilized again. That also creates a more porous soil so that water, oxygen, and nutrients can work through that soil in a more efficient manner for the next crop that's coming through. How does that translate to a golf course, for example? Well, you have thatch buildup. If you have thatch buildup, that's because you don't have enough fungi degrading that at the same time. You shouldn't actually have that buildup if you have a balanced soil ecosystem. So the fungi can consume the bacteria, protect the roots, and help the roots find water and nutrients through that whole system that we just talked about, creating a porous soil, creating more organic matter, creating more food sources for the soil food web to function properly. You have protozoa and nematodes, and not so much with protozoa, but with nematodes. Sometimes people are thinking about nematodes and they're like, well, I have a nematode problem. I need a nematicide to fix this. There are good and bad nematodes, just like there are good and bad fungi. We hear about fungus on turf, and it's a disease, it's a problem. Well, if the good fungi outnumber the bad fungi, then you're probably not going to run into that problem quite as often. Now, weather conditions will affect the type of soil microbes that you have within the rhizosphere of the soil. So that rhizosphere, you have a few inches of rhizosphere where that root system is residing and where you have the activity of that soil food web. That's really what we're talking about. Now you can have a freeze over the winter. You can have really hot and humid weather in the summer. Any of those extremes that you face within your environment, whether it be Florida, Maine, or somewhere in between, it's the extremes within your own environment that you have to pay attention to that can knock things out of balance within your soil food web. So you may have nematodes that, like a root knot or sting or lance nematodes that could grow in abundance because the nematodes that should be there, that should be helping the functionality of the soil, were wiped out because of some of those extreme weather conditions. Same thing with fungi, same thing with any of these components of the soil food web. So protozoa and nematodes, why they're important is because they eat bacteria, organic matter, other protozoa and fungi, and they release enzymes and important factors that the other components need to produce usable nutrients in the usable source for the plant type. They require less nitrogen than bacteria, so you're actually releasing more nitrogen that's available for the plant. So when you think about that, bacteria requires nitrogen. Protozoa and nematodes require nitrogen, but anything that they don't require that is in the soil, they're still going to consume it, but then they're going to release it in a more usable source for that plant. So although bacteria does the conversion, protozoa and nematodes may do a better conversion. It depends on the plant type, depends on the soil type, and what your environment is, but they are definitely required in the soil food web. So as I was saying, when they're out of balance, you don't get the productivity out of the soil that you need. And the only way that you can get back in balance is if you reintroduce some of these soil microbes. They're probably there, but if you think of things in a compounding interest factor when it comes to growing and colonizing within the soil, the larger the number that you start with as a multiplier, the faster you can multiply. If you don't have to go through a season to get a compound interest one time, say that we start in season 20 rather than season 1 as far as what the populations would actually be. Well, now season 20 is really productive and you get to benefit from that right away, versus starting from a natural standpoint where you could have great weather conditions and you let those soil microbes colonize and build back up within the soil. Well, do you want to wait 20 years or do you want to start at year 20? That's really the question of, like, do you introduce a product like Bio 800 Plus where it takes you right to that point of year 20 in the natural process. And on top of that, then we add in the food sources for those specific soil food web components that we're looking for to help them colonize and grow and build back that soil food web much, much faster than if it was going to do it naturally. You almost need a little bit of luck, not a little bit. It's like playing the lottery. You need a lot of luck when it comes to what microbes are there, in what numbers, what food sources are there, in what numbers, and what weather you're going to get over that amount of time to keep compounding a positive result. Are you going to have great weather or ideal weather for 20 years? Probably not. So when you think of it that way, we need to be very intentional about what we're doing, because the plant types that we are dealing with on residential property are not native to that soil. So we need to make those plants feel like they're native to that soil. We want to accelerate that process. That helps us reduce the amount of fertilizer that's needed, and they can work within their natural environment, build up their natural defenses so that we don't face so many challenges on an annual basis, regardless of what the weather conditions are. Are we going to face challenges? Yes, 100%. We always face challenges because we can't predict the weather. But we will reduce the stress that we feel and that the plant feels when we're going through that process. So we want to harness the power of soil microbes. If you think about a forest, is someone going around and fertilizing the forest? No, because it is native to that environment and it is running through its normal life cycle. There is growth, there is decay, there is an abundance of activity within the soil. In every millimeter of soil, there is a million different things happening within that soil food web in order to process and create a healthy environment. So adding microbes back to the soil keeps it working, and we have the diversity because you don't always know what's missing in the soil. We know so little as a society about our soil. We actually know more about the universe and celestial beings than we know about all the soil food web, which is crazy to think about, because we think that, hey, because we're in contact with it and we can touch it, that we know more about it. But it's on such a microbial level that we're still learning about all those interactions. And if you think about how much we know about Mars on an individual basis, we really don't know that much. Well, we don't know that much about the soil either. So we have to take an approach of, hey, we know that the plant wants this, so we're going to provide that for it in an abundance, but we don't know on a small scale, or and by small scale, I mean like one residential property. We don't know everything that's missing. So you kind of take a buckshot approach. All right, we're going to throw everything at it and the kitchen sink, and the soil is going to sort out what holes it needs to plug in order to support the plants that are there. So what is Bio 800? Well, Bio 800 is over 800 different living species of microorganisms. And we use that 800 number because that's actually the lowest number that we've seen in any of our mixes. We're constantly improving it. That number is growing higher and higher, and that's different species. That's not the number of species. We want that diversity so that we can be more effective in a variety of different soil types. What's going to happen is when you introduce that, you're going to be able to reduce fertilizers, improve plant health and plant resilience against the stressors we were talking about, improve seed germination and rooting. And at the end of the day, if you understand this and you can communicate this, you're going to differentiate your company within the environment and in your community. And really, this is the approach that homeowners want. The first thing they want is results, which we provide. The second thing they want is to know that they're doing it the right way. Are they taking the correct approach? Are they taking an approach that we don't have to sacrifice some of our environment in order to accomplish. We're actually building environment in order to accomplish results rather than sacrificing environment to build results. So in a we've used this example of university studies quite a few times, but just as so that you can see an understanding of this, I believe there was 24 or 26 universities that contributed to this study. This is just 3 examples that are varying examples. Everyone else kind of fell between the NC State and Purdue test. But this is an example of how many pounds of nitrogen you would need on 1,000 square feet to accomplish the optimum color and vigor. And NC State said, hey, you can reduce by 50% when incorporating Bio 800 Plus. Penn State found a 75% reduction, and Purdue found an 88% reduction. Now, does that mean that you're going to be able to do that reduction right away? Sometimes you can. Most of the time, you may need a season to get all the way to some of those reductions, just because you need to get that soil functioning. It also depends on how many times are you applying Bio 800 in a season. Are you doing a full program? Or are you doing a one-time application? You can automatically get a reduction. It depends on the fertilizer type, the soil type, and what you're trying to accomplish. You absolutely will get a reduction right away. And then you'll get into seeing reduction percentages based on, again, what you're trying to accomplish, how consistent you've been with your applications, and rebuilding that soil health. A great example is Broken Sound Golf Club. They're in Boca Raton, Florida. They reduced nitrogen by 20% because they're focused on performance. They're not focused on the reduction. They're trying to increase playability, increase the results, still be environmentally friendly at the same time, and building up their soil. But when it comes to the return on investment, they saw a 20% reduction in nitrogen, 30% reduction in fungicides, 12% reduction in irrigation. Their rooting improved by 50%. That's not just depth, but that's density as well. They improved recovery time on all the spots on the course, the par 3 tee boxes, the heavy divot areas within fairways. Wherever they had the most wear and tear, they noticed an obvious recovery time reduction. They improved their cation exchange capacity from 5 to 27%. They have 2 different courses there. So over 36 holes, they had some variance there, but there was always an improvement in order to in that ion exchange capacity. And they reduced their nematode pressure. I mentioned this before. They actually had root knot, lance, and sting nematodes, and they were, in some cases, had massive reductions. In other cases, completely wiped it out. So when you're able to have that type of result, rather than using a nematicide, which almost sterilizes soil, at least sterilizes components of soil, where you're completely wiping out all the nematodes. There are good and bad nematodes. We talked about this before. Well, if you have to wipe them all out in order to get rid of the bad ones, that's like a Thanos approach in like the Avengers, where it's like, well, we're just gonna completely wipe out half the population in order to regulate how we survive in the environment. It's not really a feasible approach. Sometimes the damage is so bad that we've had to do that in the past, but if you can introduce new nematodes to wipe out the bad nematodes, then you're able to keep benefiting from that, and you don't have to make any sacrifices. The Shrubbery Specialist in Huntsville, Alabama. You can read what's on the screen, but really one of the cool things about this one is they had a Pythium blight problem on boxwoods, and they had it for years, and it was a boxwood maze, and these boxwoods were so many years old that it was almost impossible to replace. And because it was a maze, like if you take out a plant, you change the maze. It doesn't really work that well. So after one season, they started to see that they were getting less pressure on the boxwoods from the blight. After 2 seasons, they were like, hey, maybe we don't have this issue to worry about. After 3 seasons, the there was no sign of the disease in the soil whatsoever. It was completely eradicated just because of the introduction of the good microbes and them being able to outweigh the bad microbes. It seems like an elementary way to explain it, but if you have more good than bad, the good will win. Benair greenhouse in New York, they were able to reduce their fertilizers by 10 to 15%. Again, it depends on what they're trying to accomplish. Are they just trying to get more growth, or are they trying to do a reduction? They were trying to accomplish both. So they were still able to get a reduction, get faster growth, replanting at a quicker interval so that they can actually make more money out of the starting point that they had in the greenhouse. They reduced their fungicides by 30%. So right on the bottom line, they cut that off. Their plants were maturing earlier and stay in peak conditions longer. So better selling season, earlier selling season. You obviously charge more for a larger plant. So in the greenhouse industry, this was a no-brainer. The Baltimore Orioles spring training facility in Sarasota, they've reduced nitrogen fertilizers by 40%, irrigation by 50%, and seeding by 75%. Just thicker, deeper, web-like root system made all the difference in the world for them. Furman University in South Carolina reduced their nitrogen fertilizers by 40%. They completely eliminated blanket fungicide applications. They typically had to do fungicide as a regular treatment in their program multiple times per year. They were able to get away from that and just go to, hey, where are we seeing the pressure? We'll do a little bit of a treatment there. But in certain sections of the campus, they completely eradicated the problem. Growing Green in North Carolina, they reduced their fertilizers by 50 to 70% depending on the lawn, and obviously improve plant and soil health along the way. This is a typical lawn care company in North Carolina. They're focused on the business model, not so much the agronomic model, but when things can line up and you can focus on the agronomics and it actually helps your business model, well then, you definitely want to follow that course of action. You have Red Diamond and Coffee in Moody, Alabama. This is a specific site, but they were able to reduce fertilizer by 45% over 2 years. Remember, we were talking about the soil type, the fertilizer type, what you're trying to accomplish as far as what your reduction is going to be. So in 2 years, they went to 45% reduction. They reduced in the same time their irrigation by 75%. Now that's massive if you're paying for your water, which in most cases, if you have an irrigation system, you're paying for your water. And over a property like that, that is saving tens of thousands of dollars every single year. And their roots are running 8 to 10 inches deep despite being heavy clay soil. So you can see a lot of different examples here about all the different ways that soil health helps plant health and how those microbes play a role within that soil health. So if you're interested in learning more, there will be a Calendly link in the email, link to more university studies and case studies. And we have upcoming webinars all the time. So make sure you're checking in on our website just to make sure of what we're going to be approaching next and see how we can help you out. Thank you very much for attending and make it a great day.